Okay, go ahead now.
Well, yeah, I mean, my father was a Marine Corps officer. He'd been a Marine Corps sergeant and fought at the Battle of Iwo Jima in World War II, and then he was a front officer at the front in the Korean War, the trench warfare phase. And very strict disciplinarian, real Marines Marine. And it was getting dark, and it was time to get in the car and go back home after visiting with my grandparents, which we did on Sundays. And so he called up the stairs, John, come on downstairs, get in the car, we're heading home. And I was so hypnotized by looking at this Hitler stamp that I completely ignored my father, which is very uncharacteristic in my family. And so my father stomped up the stairs and he said to me, John, didn't you hear me? I said, let's get in the car. He says, what's that you got in your hands there? And he grabbed it out of my hand, he looked at it, and he said to me, John, he looked at me, because I was reading all kinds of books from the age of 2 and 3 on, and he said to me, John, that was a very bad, bad, bad man. He says, and he took that stamp away and he hid it somewhere. It was in a frame, little glass frame. And he said, now get in the car. And right after that, I started learning German, about the age of 5. And later on, my one German relative was my great-grandmother. Her maiden name was Berlin, in fact, blonde and blue-eyed. And she was dying here in Pittsburgh, in the Greensburg area. And we flew out to see her on her deathbed. And she was like 97 years old. And there was a German lady on the plane, a lady from Germany. And I had a little German dictionary with me. And I started a conversation with her at like age 5. And she was just stunned that this little American kid was trying to speak German with her. So we find that even as small children, we are attracted to some things. And other things we just decide instinctively are sinister. We have a bad vibe about certain people or certain things, or certain groups of people. And I had that as a little kid, these things that attracted me and other things that I found detestable. And I think that when people understand how important reincarnation was to the ancient Aryan peoples, that it may restore their belief in God, and that every life we go through is a trial and a test and a challenge.
Now, John, let me ask you about this. The Jews try to say we're the chosen people. That's what the whole Schofield Bible was about, to try to convince Christians, white Christians, that that the Jews are the chosen people. Now, Christian identity, I wrote my book on Christian identity. I believe I sent you a copy.
Yes, very good. Yeah, excellent book.
And I wrote that in with cooperation from a Christian identity pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have any problem believing that 2,000 years ago, one of my ancestors decided slavery sucked, and they walked out. They walked out of servitude in Egypt or whatever, and possibly, they were even led out by Moses. I don't know. We don't know. I don't even know who my grandmother slept with. So I don't know how far we can trace back our lineage.
Right.
But I don't have any problem believing that my ancestors were Israelites, because we crossed the Caucasus Mountains and we did exactly what we were supposed to do. We passed the word out. We got the Bible out. Although the Catholic Church tried to keep that from happening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think that, the problem is that psychopaths take over every religion, every political party, and every corporation. They take over everything because that's in their nature. They're diabolic, and they use defamation, blackmail, and murder, and poisoning, and people get accidented and suicided and heart attacked and all these things. And psychopaths take over every powerful institution, so they can wield their sadistic will over other people. And so Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, every religion, these psychopaths try to take it over and twist the original meaning of the scriptures and of the founder of any religion into something which is the opposite of its intention. and becomes, I mean, you know, every religion is a fast track to sex, money, power, and domination, if that's what your motive is. And it's happened to every, you know, I mean, L. Ron Hubbard said openly that, you know, there's no better way to become a millionaire than to start a religion. And so that's what's been going on. I was in...
Speaking of that, just a moment. Let me interrupt you for just a second. You know, the Christian identity people. I wrote the book promoting Christian identity because the Homeland Security lumped Christian identity pastor or Christian identity people right in there with militias and veterans and anybody else.
Yep. Well, you know, I think they're very afraid of any kind of religion which will give white people backbone and a willingness to fight and to be proud of their blood. And of course, Christian identity does that. It has a lot of Old Testament themes in it. And, you know, if people say, well, they admire the Jews, well, for keeping their blood and keeping their traditions and the covenant and all that, well, fine, white people should have that too. White people should also feel there's something divine, and we have a higher mission and a calling and a covenant with God, and we should keep our race pure. Any people that is proud of their heritage and sees their survival as a people as being God's will are going to be strong, and they're going to fight. And so, of course, the Homeland Security would be terrified at Christian identity. I think there's a lot of good in it.
But then the Christian identity people started attacking me and even attacking Eli James. They attacked me because I promoted our use of pot, because the Bible says God gave us all these plants for our use, and hemp is the most productive plant. It was stolen from us by communists. I mean, come on, you can't grow hemp in this country. Our number one cash crop, $1 billion crop, but you can grow it in Red China, you can grow it in Russia, you can grow it in Canada, you can grow it in Mexico, you just can't grow it here.
Oh boy.
And, they also attacked me. We had one of them attack me because, and I've lost so-called Christian friends like Tex Mars who won't even take a call from me now because I questioned Pauline Christianity.
Yeah.
You know, be a good slave. Don't rebel against your masters. And Paul wasn't. He was a Pharisee charged with killing Christians.
Yeah. I agree. You know, it's a very sensitive thing because Saul, the Sanhedrin agent Saul, who participated in the murder of Saint Stephen, the first Christian martyr after Christ himself was killed. He wrote some good stuff. I mean, you read, you know, in the Corinthians, you know, about, yea, though I have all these gifts, but have not love, you know, and nothing, and so forth. And there's a lot of good stuff, but I consider Saul to be an absolute infiltrator from the Sanhedrin. Once he realized Christianity could not be stopped, he said, then we're going to take it over.
Yeah, I said, I think he was... The thought hit him so hard he was knocked off his donkey on the road to Damascus.
Yeah.
And said, I don't have to kill these Christians, I can take it over. And the result of his work is the creation of the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is the first ones to declare war on the Muslims. And the Muslims and Christians had no differences back in 700s. It was the Sanhedrins, it was the Pharisees that were attacking the followers of Muhammad, and it was the Pharisees that actually wrote the Quran, because Muhammad was illiterate. So how could he even check what they were writing?
Yeah, it was Judaism for Arabs, basically, is what Islam is. I've in my videos, I've talked, particularly video number 8, If you go to DeNugent.com, I have, it says there, About John as a tab at the top, and go down to videos of me speaking, spiritual video number 8. I review, among other things, a book which has come out, it's only in French, The History of Anti-Semitism, Histoire de l'Antisémitisme, by Hervé Ries, a graduate of the great Sorbonne University, which is the Harvard of France. And the book is very interesting. It's not about anti-Semitic, books and movies and speeches. It's about actions by the common people rising up against these Khazar Jews. It's about actions by the common people, I repeat, and by governments and actions that take place, anti-Semitic actions. Yeah, but one of the things, Clay, that really appalled me the most was this. Over and over and over again, it was popes and the Catholic Church that protected the Jews from the wrath of the common people. For the umpteenth time, they found some little body of some little white Christian boy, his throat slashed open and all the blood drained out. And one of the stupid things about these Khazar Jews is in their tradition of ritual murder, because we are goyim, we are animals, and we are cattle, you don't bury an animal with a funeral or anything. You just throw the body out into a field, or you toss it in the river, because it's just an animal. I mean, this is a big part of their black magic theory, that you can't bury the body after you've drained it of its blood. You cannot. It destroys the black magic effect if you bury it like a human being deserving a proper burial. So after every ritual murder, they just throw the kid's body out in the field where the animals gnaw at it. It's horrible to even talk about this. Or they throw it in the river, and it just floats. So over and over again, these Jews would ritually murder some of our children. You talk about little Hugh of Lincoln, England. You talk about little St. Simon of Trent in northern Italy. Case in Hungary in the 1860s, where 13 Jews were arrested. The case of that Catholic priest in Damascus, Syria, which is a huge case from the 1830s. Huge, well-documented case. And the case in, 1913, 1914 in the Ukraine. I think it was in Berlin, ritual murder and trials and everything. The common people rose up to get these bastards. But the Catholic Church protected them because they quoted from Saul, the Apostle Paul, and particularly the book to the Romans, the Epistle to the Romans, where Paul promises, don't persecute the Jews, don't wipe out the Jews, because in the end, all Israel will be saved. In the end, the Jews will convert, they will embrace Christ. They will become Christians, my brothers, just be patient. Well, Saul, it's been 2,000 years we've been waiting for the Jews to convert to Christianity. And not only ain't it happened yet, but they are eliminating the Christian religion, not converting to it. So I think that Saul was an agent of the Sanhedrin, and he said, Christianity has legs, as they say in the theater world. It's like a Broadway play that's going to go on and on and on. And so we better get in on it and twist it back around into a Jewish religion, re-Judaize it. And I think that's what he did. And I put on my blog also that some of the things that Saul says directly contradict a guy named Jesus Christ. Because if you look at Matthew chapter 23, there's 3 parables in a row in Matthew 23. This isn't the early Jesus reaching out to the Jews and trying to open their hearts. This is the late Jesus, shortly before he's arrested and crucified. And there's bitterness and anger in Jesus at the end of his ministry. And he has 3 different parables. In each of these 3 parables, it says that when the master, he sends out his slaves to invite people to the wedding feast because my son is getting married, and we know who the son refers to. And then they kill the slaves, and so then the master says, well, send out slaves, go back out and just bring in people from the roadside. Just bring in the common people from all around, and we'll have them attend the wedding feast of my son. And he states explicitly, and he proves in these and in other parables, if the Jews reject Jesus Christ, if the Jews murder the Son of God, the covenant is over. But hey, who is Jesus? What is the word of Jesus Christ compared to Saul, the Sanhedrin agent? So I think Christians have to choose. Do you believe in Jesus Christ, who said if the Jews murdered the Son of God, it would be the end of the covenant? Or do you believe Saul, who in his epistle to the Romans claimed that the covenant with the Jews was still in effect.
It's I got this whole thing about Saul, from a member, from somebody in the seminary, but he was told that only those higher up in the church were allowed to understand who Paul was.
Yeah. Well, it's a very, very typical case of the Jews taking over something that they can't stop, but they think we can get money and power and over in Hervé Recent's book, The History of Anti-Semitism. The Catholic Church. Well, I'll give an example of so many things that are fascinating. Duns Scotus, which means Dun the Scot, actually, in Latin. He was one of the greatest theologians in the Middle Ages. I didn't know this, but Hervé Recent, graduate of the great Sorbonne in Paris, the oldest university in the world, founded in like 1100 or something, he quotes Duns Scotus. And somebody had said, oh, but remember St. Paul's epistle to the Romans, and, in the end all Israel will be saved, so we can't massacre them, we can't do something about them. And Duns Scotus said, I know about this passage. Here's my solution. Duns Scotus said, we wipe out all the Jews, and we take 10 of them, and we put them on an island somewhere. And let the prophecy of St. Paul be fulfilled on those 10 Jews on their island. Whenever they're ready to be converted, let them convert. Okay, but as for the rest of them, they are a plague on the human race. We've got to do something about these people. Either we get them or they will exterminate us. And that's what Duns Scotus said.
This the Muslims. I mean, this has been planned since the Civil War for at least 150 years. For the Christians to go to war with the Muslims.
Yep.
And the Jews, the Sanhedrins, the Khazarians, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call them,
yeah,
they are the only ones that profit off of this, because they make the money off the weapons of the war, and then they make the money from the companies like Brown and Root. They go back in and rebuild everything they blew up with the Jewish weapons that they created. And let's see, who controls the atomic weapons? I mean, Israel has over 500 nuclear weapons, and we're upset about Iran building a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are people who have through that horrible Martin van Crefeld have said, if Israel goes under, we'll nuke the whole world. He's directly stated it. We'll use Air Force and we'll destroy everybody in Europe.
They bragged that they could hit every capital in Europe from Israel.
Yep, with American-supplied weapons. Isn't that wonderful? They'd use our own weapons. We gave them generously to destroy everybody in the white race. I mean, if I can go back then to this Gulf oil spill of last year.
A direct attack. That was a direct attack on our food supply.
It is. And this Corexit is killing people all throughout the Gulf region. But worse than that, even worse than the slow killing of people, through the fumes from this Corexit going into the air in Florida, and Louisiana, and Alabama, and Mississippi, and Texas. What affects people far north of there is that this oil not floating to the surface where we can scoop it up, but sinking to the bottom of the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. This oil has stopped the Gulf Stream. It has stopped the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream is what brings the warm Mexican water up to the northern United States, toward the northern area of Canada, and up to the British Isles and to the continent of Europe. And 80% of the white people in the world live in this band of the northern half of the United States and Canada and Europe and Russia. So when the Gulf Stream is killed by this oil sinking to the bottom, and on the currents at the bottom of the ocean, it's been plugged up. It's been gummed up, and the Gulf Stream has been basically choked off. And so what this means is we're going to get more and more severe, harsh winters in Northern Europe. And you could eventually have literally the ice ages come back to Europe in the northern half of the United States. I mean, where I am right now, a little bit north of Pittsburgh, if you drive 17 miles further north of where I am sitting right now, you would get to Moraine State Park. And a moraine is an area where a glacier had pushed a giant wall of earth and rock and rubble and gravel up, huge walls like levees or embankments of debris that a glacier has pushed forward, rocks and whatnot. And Moraine State Park is just 17 miles from here because the glaciers covered all of Canada and the whole top third of the United States and stopped just 17 miles from here. So gigantic areas where the white race flourishes, Europe, Russia, Canada, all of Canada and the United States, Alaska, all that, would be gone under 3 miles of ice and glaciers. And so all of the habitats of the white race will be destroyed if the Gulf Stream completely stops. And that's the plan. That is the reason why on April 20th, the birthday of Adolf Hitler, the man who wanted to save the white race, very misunderstood man, made a lot of mistakes, did some things that were wrong, very stubborn German guy, but he was brilliant. I think he's an idealistic person. On his birthday, they started this Gulf oil spill, and the Corexit that they're dumping in there. And I know somebody who worked on that, was it Macondo oil rig that exploded? He was up doing fracking and natural gas drilling right here up my street in Sarver, Pennsylvania. I talked with him. He showed me a bottle of Corexit, this clear stuff in a bottle. It makes the oil sink to the bottom. It doesn't disperse. You can't scoop it up. And it has stopped the Gulf Stream. And I said this, and I predicted in the summer of last year that Europe and North America would have the harshest winters in many decades or even centuries. And I've got a space heater running right now as I'm doing this interview with you, Clay. I've got the space heater running right now. And it's May.
And yeah, I just heard that that they've got blizzards going up there.
Yep, exactly. So Europe. Well, there was a photo I ran on my blog of England. There was a moment, and you could see it from a NASA satellite photo. Every single square inch of England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales was covered with snow. First time ever. Every inch of the British Isles was covered with snow. Historic colds, historic levels of snowfall, and this is because the Gulf Stream has been stopped by the satanic Kabbalistic Jews. And this is why Duns Scotus said, forget the Apostle Paul, forget the book to the Romans. It says, do something about these Jews before they do something about us and exterminate us. And he says, put 10 of them on an island, and then you can wait for your prophecy of St. Paul that all Israel will be saved and the Jews will eventually embrace Christ. Oh, do your experiment with those 10 Jews on an island somewhere.
You know, I've said at the Council of Nicaea,
yeah,
I believe that and you know, I really don't doubt that this was Jewish control, Sanhedrin, Pharisaic Jews controlling this. They promoted Jesus to God because they didn't want men like you and I aspiring to be the kind of man he was. And what he told us is, you can do what I do and more. You know, I think we all have a direct connection to God. We call it a soul.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
And you know, I've asked preachers, hey, you know, preacher, you know, well, Clay, why don't we ever see you in church? Does God talk to you, preacher, and tell you what to say to your flock? They stutter a bit and go, well, yeah, yes, oh, yes, he does.
Oh, there you go, there you go. And
I say, me too. You know, I really don't doubt that this was Jewish control, Sanhedrin, Pharisaic Jews controlling this. They promoted Jesus to God because they didn't want men like you and I aspiring to be the kind of man he was. And what he told us is, you can do what I do and more. You know,
Mm-hmm.
And I say, So why would I need to come to listen to your version of this?
Yep.
Now, what about this Council of Nicaea? I mean, this elevated the Catholic Church, and for hundreds of years after the Council of Nicaea, if you were a white man, you couldn't even read a Bible.
Yep. Well, it's very clear that every religion can be misused by psychopaths. And in the end, people sense it and they stop believing in God, and that's what the JT wants. They want us to be atheists and fear death. In other words, if you have an inclination to fight for your country, or maybe even sacrifice yourself like George Washington or some of our heroes, then what they tell you is, well, think about it good, because you could be dead for billions of years. Once you're dead, you'd be dead for a long time. Isn't it smarter just live as a slave on your knees and beg the tiger to eat you last? You could live a few years longer. You might not enjoy it, but at least you'd be alive. You could be dead for a long time, man. And so they preach atheism, and you only got one life. So grab all the gusto you can, like the old beer slogan was. Grab all the gusto you can, because, and here's their claim, you only go around once in life. That's what they claim to be true. That you only have one life, and then you're dead forever. So the Jews promote atheism. And by corrupting all these different religions, people get turned off by religion. And then they just become a consumer of food and sex and then TV and whatnot.
Now let's talk about that, because in the fiction novel that I'm writing right now, and keep in mind, folks, let me tell you, let me do something real quick here, John. I've got books out, The Mystery Babylon, which the New World Order unveiled, the talking about Christian identity, the True Israelite Handbook. I've also got my fiction, my One Bloody Alabaster Eye, that has a future segment in that, when my character, the hero in here, Trevor Cameron, is in the future fighting a guerrilla war in the United States.
Yeah.
And Deadly Flashes of Silver is about an attack on a nuclear power plant. I wrote these 10 years ago. So the fiction that I wrote 10 years ago is happening now. The books that I'm working on now, the Lucifer legend.
Yeah.
I talk about Lucifer being 5,000 years old, and he comes back as he's reincarnated and comes back as different characters throughout history.
Oh yeah, it makes sense.
And he remembers. He is able to remember, and he also has the ability to remember his DNA and access his DNA to attack basically the read the Akashic records, and I think it's I don't know that I'm writing fiction. I have memories of wearing a kilt. I have memories of being a scribe at the pyramids, so I and I've also been told this is my last involuntary incarnation. I think you keep coming back here until you learn who you are and what you are, and then you can go on to do some more important work.
Yeah, I think that people, in many cases, come here voluntarily to learn more things. I've actually been translating with the whole team of volunteers a wonderful book from German by Michael Winkler, a German author. He used to be a computer programmer, and then he went back to his true calling, which was to write books about spirituality. He also writes a lot about politics in Germany. Very smart. He's got a great American style, fast and snappy, and he adds a lot of humor. It's not like a heavy German book at all. But this book is about reincarnation and the details. And if you ever wanted somebody to flesh out the details of what happens when you die and where you go, and one of the things that's most fascinating about this to me was he refers, of course, to what so many people have seen who had this, the out-of-body experience. They see the tunnel of light and so forth. They go through this tunnel toward the light, And when you get to the top of this tunnel, you see a video of your life. But here's the scary part, Clay. Everybody's heard about this tunnel,